Hello, my friends. Mary Rose here on a Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Such a treat to be with you at our customary appointment. If you're watching on Facebook, please go to streamyard.com/Facebook. Give permission to show your name. You'll find the link right above where the video is posted in the Path of the Storyteller Facebook group, so it should not be difficult to locate. I am delighted to see a bunch of you here already. Please feel free to say hi in the comments. Let me know who's watching. It's always a treat to be with you here at our Wednesday live streams, 1 p.m. Pacific time. I am Mary Rose Wood, and I'm here weekly or most weeks to hang out with you all, answer your questions, and do some talks about my favorite topics. And I think they're your favorite topics as well: story structure, writing craft, and the mindset of the working, thriving writer. All three of these topics have endless content for us to explore. There's always more to say. Sometimes we have a lot to say about things that we've talked about before. As our understanding increases, we have fresh questions. As we gain experience, we start to understand sometimes how much we don't know. That's a good sign. It's a mark of progress. What's our topic today? Listen, I don't want to make anyone feel called out about this, but it's time to get off the couch. No more couch potatoes. Now, I'm not talking about you. Whether you have some, ergonomic issues about writing on the couch or spending too much time with your laptop in your lap, that's for you to work out. I highly recommend some lumbar support, a comfortable chair, a desk that's the right height. You know what to do. You can check all that out. I'm not talking about you being a couch potato. I'm talking about your hero being a couch potato, a passive hero, a hero who will not get up off the metaphorical sofa and drive the story forward. It's not good. Why isn't it good? We're going to talk about that today. How can you tell if you're doing it? We're going to talk about that today too. Why might you be doing it? Why do so many writers do it? We're going to talk about that today. And what should we do instead? Well, my friends, we're going to talk about that today too. So I think this is going to be a fun topic. It is broadly relevant. Let's just say it's broadly relevant. Many writers have to struggle with this at various points in their development and also as part of their writing process. We're going to talk about all these things. Let me take a moment to say hi to the folks in the chat box. Hey, Anne, it's so good to see you here. I'm delighted that you're here. Nancy, warm greetings to you. Terry, Finn, waving back at you. Ellen, it's so good to have you here. Wonderful to have you guys and more here. Now, listen, all of these folks who are here are on my mailing list because I know who they are. But if you're watching this video and you're not on my mailing list, that makes me sad. Don't let me be sad. Join the mailing list. It's www.pathofthestoryteller.com. And what happens when you get on the list? Only good things happen. You start to get a weekly email from me with a little bit of a exploration of what the week's live stream topic is going to be. You're going to hear about upcoming course offerings, one-on-one coaching offerings, and all kinds of delightful things. Only good things will happen to you once you get on my mailing list. So I really would love that. It's like the first step to us getting to know each other a little better. So, so take that step. Take that step. Hey, oh, and Katie's here too. We had a new arrival come. So, passive hero problem. I would love, as we talk, if any of you have that experience of either realizing or being told that your hero is passive while you were working on a draft, don't be shy, share about it. Maybe there's something that we can do or talk about to help you and weave your particular questions into the conversation. I always love to do that. All right, so let's begin. Let's not be passive. Let's get up off the couch and begin this discussion of what I'm calling the passive hero, the couch potato hero. So just a quick definition. We're going to dive into it in all its nuances as our talk progresses today. But it is just what it sounds like. It's the hero of our story, the protagonist, the main character, the character for whom, in theory, all of this storytelling is happening. And yet they are simultaneously the center of it all and and sort of refusing to participate fully. They're passive. They just don't want to play. They don't want to be picked for the team. They don't know what they want. They're not driving the story forward. At the path of the storyteller, we call this the hero driving the bus. There may be other characters on the bus, chances are there will be, but your hero is supposed to be the one driving. And maybe your hero is just more comfortable napping in the back seat. So that's a passive hero. All right, basic definition, just what it sounds like. So the first question I want to unravel a bit. Let's take nothing for granted. Why is that a problem? Why is it wrong for the hero to be passive? Isn't that just another kind of personality? Aren't there people in real life who just tend to be passive? Maybe our hero is just one of those types of people, right? So why make us such a fuss? Why do we have to have a whole live stream criticizing this perfectly valid type of hero? Well, let's find out. Let's find out. In order for me to answer that question, we have to remind ourselves of what the basic definition of a story is. Now, a story, in my way of thinking, and I'm not alone in this way of thinking, is a depiction and also the mechanism of a profound and meaningful journey of transformation. So it's a depiction of it, but it's also the mechanism that causes it. It is both the pasta and the pasta machine, if you will. Now, when we say a journey of transformation, whose transformation are we talking about? The writers? Well, as I'm sure many of you have experienced, we do sometimes go on a pretty big adventure of transformation in order to develop as artists. It's a lifetime practice, and we have to stir the pot of the self quite a bit to be the best writer we can be. So there is a journey of transformation that goes on within the writer. But in terms of storytelling, that's a career question, right? That's a lifetime question. In terms of storytelling, the journey of transformation is the hero. Like the hero is the one that's gonna change. It is the hero who's not going to be the same person at the end of the book as they are at the beginning. They will have changed internally, and their external circumstances are going to reflect this. There will be changes in the inside and outside world. Now, if that were not the case, then this would be a book in which we would get to the end and we would say, nothing happened. Just all of those pages and nothing happened. It's like the very definition of nothing happened. And everything was the same at the end as it was in the beginning. Nobody changed, nobody grew, nobody learned anything, nobody sacrificed, nobody did anything. We don't care for these types of books. They don't, hopefully we don't come across them too often. It's just not a story. It's just not a story. Now, this journey of transformation, these are concepts that I borrow from and develop in a kind of a, across the divide of generations dialogue with Joseph Campbell, who codified his study of mythology into a kind of a system, not a formula, but just a kind of an organized set of observations about how stories from all kinds of cultures through all periods of history reflect exactly this dynamic, this journey of transformation of the hero. And so that's why I say it's both the pasta and the pasta machine, because it's not just that we write stories that show people changing. We design our stories in order to change the hero. So it's a little bit of a difference there, which I hope is clear to everyone. And because we, the writer, the boss of the book, the boss of the storytelling, the puppeteer, the manufacturer of this entire fictional universe, because we are creating the story in order to affect this change in our hero, it's as if we are designing a bespoke suit of story for this hero. What exactly is it that this hero needs to change? So since we're making it all up, it's this kind of interesting dynamic, right? We're inventing the hero with all their foibles and their need for change, but then we're also inventing the journey of change that they go on. And so we're in charge of both ends of it. Like we're holding both ends of the stick, right? We're making up a hero who needs to change, who needs to come of age or learn a lesson or grow into their full actualization. There's just all kinds of journeys of change that we can see in the stories that we love. And we're deciding what our heroes need for change is. And then we're also figuring out, so what would have to happen for this person to go on that badly needed, urgently needed journey of transformation. So it's a lot of making up, isn't it? So as you see, we want our hero to be active because it's without the hero being active, the journey of change won't happen. And there's essentially no story, right? If I have on a personal level, a desperately urgent need, urgently identified need to change, and other people go on adventures and tell me about them, I am unlikely to be changed by that experience. We're back on the sofa. I mean, ordinary humans can sit on the sofa and watch all the adventures in the world on Netflix, on the television set, and they are not necessarily changed by them. At the end of the evening, they're still sitting on the sofa, right? They were entertained but not transformed. And so we want better for our heroes. We have to actually make something more dynamic happen for our heroes in order to please our readers, to give them a satisfying journey. So essentially, a passive hero cannot fulfill the function of allowing a story to be born from them. It's just not going to work. So this is my answer basically to this first inquiry, which is, why is a passive hero a problem? Because nobody's going to change if our hero never gets off the sofa. And if our hero doesn't change, there's no story. That's the short answer. Okay. Now, let me dig a little deeper into why I'm even talking about this. Because if a passive hero is not a fertile ground for a story of transformation to rise from, well, so then people who write stories obviously are going to avoid passive heroes like the plague. Am I right? Am I right? No, oddly enough, counterintuitively enough, it is so common for really well-intended, smart storytellers to sit down and work and try their best to get a story off the ground, but be really locked into a very passive central character. And it just seems to happen frequently, over and over again. And it happens so often that I myself have developed a bit of a theory about why this is so. So I'm going to share it with you now in case it feels like it resonates with you at all. If it doesn't, then maybe it's just something to be on watch for. As writers, as people who are moved to write, we love to write, we want to write. The temperament of the writer includes almost always an appetite for observation, a curiosity about other people and the way the world is and why people do the things they do. We're just little social scientists, we writers, and we're very, very interested in behavior and emotion, and we experience life in a way that incites this curiosity. It rustles up our feelings. Sometimes it makes us have to stop and take a sip of water. Forgive me for a second as I do that. So we get activated, we get riled up by the things we see going on in the world, right? We read about them in the newspaper, we observe them in a friend's life, sometimes we observe something in our own life. We observe and we ponder and we interpret, and we really try to interpret, a lot of writers, this is a fascinating thing that you'll notice if you have researched the lives of your favorite writers. So many writers have an experience in their background, often a childhood experience of being like ostracized a little bit, or being sick and having to keep themselves entertained, or just being taken out of the fray, just being taken out of the middle of the action and put on the side so that they got to observe. Sometimes writers come from families where the behavior of the adults was somewhat inscrutable, and the young writer to be was left trying to make sense of things, trying to connect the dots. It becomes very skillful at inventing a little narrative, right, to explain what's going on. So they just remove themselves, and it's a really interesting thing. I'm not saying that all writers are like this, but many writers are, and one can see in biography after biography of, oh, that was the year that, Kipling was ill and spent in bed, or, just lots of little tales like that. Sickly kids grow up to be writers a lot. It's really interesting. So you can feel it, right? As I talk about that, how the capacity to be an observer and to try to connect the dots within your own mind becomes very central to the writer's way of thinking, and 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 often blossoms into the ambition to write later on in life. So let's just say for a moment that you, as a writer, in some fashion, maybe you weren't ill as a child, maybe your family was completely happy and there was nothing to interpret. It was all emotionally clear and you were at the center of the action and it was all great. Nobody ever stopped you from doing anything you wanted to do. If you had that kind of childhood, blessings upon you. May that happen for more. But let's just say that somehow this appetite for observation and interpretation found its way into your temperament, and that when you sit down to write, you draw upon it. It may not be all of you, but it's a strong piece within you, and so you draw upon it. So of course you must. That's the very nature of sort of sitting down and being a writer. How much of that then inadvertently or unconsciously seeps into how you imagine your main character? Now, this is my theory, which is that as writers are developing, that the impulse to allow the stance of the writer, this observing stance, this, kind of like looking askance at the world, taking it all in, trying to understand all the pieces of it, what's going on, how do I connect the dots of these, what's motivating all of these very different characters, that stance actually then becomes how you approach the character who is, in a sense, your doppelganger in the text, the protagonist, the hero, that there's just a bit of a soft, mushy boundary between you, the observer, the interpreter, the writer, and the hero, who starts to then be situated in the middle of the story you're inventing as what? The active driver, essentially the subject of your great story experiment? No, as the observer of the story you're writing, as the interpreter of the story you're writing, right? As in a sense, the writer of the story you're writing. So if we have a tendency, an unexamined tendency, to make our hero like the writer of the narrative and then put them in the middle of it, this turns into a passive hero, like over and over and over again. And I see this over and over again. And so it's a necessary phase of the development of a writer, I would say, in many, many cases. But we have to identify it and kind of call ourselves out about it. I mean, I'm going to throw in another term that some of you may be familiar with. It's a little bit of it's not, I want to say disrespectful. It's a little bit condescending, and I don't mean it that way, but you may have heard this term, and I want to connect it to what I'm describing here because you may recognize it. There is a phrase that is often used to describe what fan fiction is like, and it's called Mary Sueism. If anyone has ever heard that phrase, you could talk about it in the comments. I'd be curious to know if that's a familiar phrase to you. So the trope of the Mary Sue character is just that very naive. And again, there's nothing wrong with being naive. We all start out naive, but there's this sort of naive impulse to write, this is not necessarily an attempt to create literature. The impulse to create fan fiction is literally the pleasure, a way of seizing the pleasure of inhabiting a favorite fictional world, of coming into relationship with fictional characters and just playing around in a fictional realm of someone else's invention. And the trope is to create the character of the Mary Sue, who is really unashamedly, kind of unabashedly, the stand-in for the writer. So if I'm a kid and I'm like obsessed with the Beatles and I want to write like a story in which Mary Rose just is at school one day and the Beatles show up and they're looking for me because they think it might be a good time for me to join the band. And I just join, and it's like, I don't deserve this. This isn't a great story. There's no reason for the Beatles to show up and ask me to go, but this is fan fiction. It's like naive, like wish fulfillment. Let's just imagine ourselves in our favorite stories with our favorite characters, like hanging out, having a good time. One of the hallmarks of this kind of writing is that the hero, the character, the Mary Sue, the stand and the avatar for the writer, is not on a journey of transformation. They're just there to meet their idols. They're there to have fun in the fictional world, right? They're like usually just there in a kind of a flawless state, and they get into it and they have a good time. So many writers start out, even as quite young kids, with an appetite to write fan fiction. There's nothing wrong with this. It's just us learning the ropes of storytelling, imagining ourselves as being capable of writing fictional scenarios. It's fine. I mean, I don't want to say most kids do this who end up being writers, but it's really common. And so awesome. So then we get a little bit more serious, more developed. We're a little older, and that Mary Sueism impulse is in the back. It's in the rearview mirror. It's behind us because now we're too cool for that. But they are still can be a kind of an unexamined shadow of it in our approach to our main characters. We're still a little bit identified with them. We're still turning them into observers and interpreters. Now, I'm going to call out an obvious time when your hero obviously is the observer and the interpreter. And that's if you're writing something in the first person. So I'm just anticipating a question for anybody out there saying, yeah, but my book's in the first person. I mean, who else is supposed to observe and interpret? Isn't that the hero's job? And it is the hero's job in the first person narrative to double. The hero has two jobs, right? In a first person narrative. They have to be the hero of the story. They have to be the one going on a journey of change. And they have to actively drive the story forward, drive that bus of narrative. And guess what? They also have to serve as the narrator. This is why, by the way, a brief aside, when writers come to me and they say, well, isn't it easier to write in the first person than it is to write in the third person? And I'm like, is it? Is it easier? I would not sign off on that. I would not sign off on that at all. It's different. It's different. To write well in the first person has unique challenges, and writing well in the third person has unique challenges. So there's that. Now, I also want to point out, just in case there's somebody out there saying, yes, but what about if your narrator in a first person book is not the hero? Is it okay for them to be the observer and the interpreter? Now, listen, this can happen, but it's quite rare. I would say that my favorite example of this strategy in fiction is Sherlock Holmes stories, which are narrated not by Sherlock Holmes, but by Dr. Watson. Many people will also raise The Great Gatsby as an example of a book that is narrated by a character, Nick, who's not the central character. It is an unusual strategy that is occasionally appropriate, and I actually am not going to advise any of you to do it. I just don't think it's often necessary. It's not the solution to this problem, right? So those are just like little asides, little exceptions to this idea that our hero should not be primarily in the story to narrate and observe. All right. So that's why I think it's so common. I think we actually have to either naturally grow out of our early over identification with the hero, or somebody, a mentor perhaps on YouTube, might have to give us a little poke and say, are you doing that? All right. So now we've talked about why it's a problem, and we've talked about why I think it's a common problem. But I know what we're here for. We're here for the red flags and the solutions. So let's get into that. And if you've got any questions, by the way, let's get them in the comments. Oh, Anne's got a little comment about Winnie the Pooh. And who doesn't like to talk about Winnie the Pooh? Anne says, this question of personality and passivity makes her think of the Winnie the Pooh. The hero changes from chapter to chapter, all different personalities. Even easygoing ones still want to do things. Interesting. Yes, easygoing personality is not the same as passive, right? One is a personality description. One is kind of a character trait. When I talk about passivity in the terms of the passive hero problem, what I'm really talking about is story structure. So let's get into that. This is definitely a nice segue into the red flag question. So what are the red flags of having a passive hero? Well, first and foremost, if your hero is mostly observing and interpreting what's going on around them, if scene after scene, they're basically just kind of describing to the reader what's happening and maybe just describing their own internal reaction to what's happening, but not a lot is getting out into the world of the story. So they're a bit stuck in their own head, and they're just observing and interpreting without actively driving the story forward. And we're going to talk about that more in a minute. So that's a red flag. The observing, interpreting hero who's not doing stuff to move the plot forward. Okay. If you've invented a hero whose emotional state falls into inactive states, and I am going to just rattle off a few inactive states. This is not a comprehensive list. But if they are so anxious and afraid all the time, right, that they can't take action, if they are sleeping and inebriated and dreaming a lot, if we are often depicting them groggy and unsure of what's going on, if they are numb with whatever emotion, if you've imagined your hero is often feeling so numb with fear or grief or rage, if just it's the numbness is a big red flag. If they are indecisive, if you've given your hero a habit of just not knowing what to do, if they're often waiting for something else to happen, if they're confused and unsure. So these are just words that describe a state that is essentially a passive state. And if you just see yourself doing that a lot, if your hero is, especially if there's a combination of things going on, if you've got your hero on the sidelines observing and interpreting something that's going on outside them, and they can't participate or act or respond because they are numb with fear or, groggy with exhaustion or whatever it is, like these scenes are pretty easy to spot in a manuscript. And again, I'm not trying to make anyone feel like point to that. It's just really common. A scene like that is something to look at. It's just something to consider, like, how often am I putting my hero in exactly this position? Even a hero who's eavesdropping is active, right? If they're listening because they need to find something out that matters to their story, like that's active. So, it's a difference, right, between a hero who might be on the sidelines observing for purposes of their own, like actively observing for purposes of their own. So that's not passive. So you have to, use your noggin about how to interpret what I'm saying here. If your hero is in a story where you have withheld the information about what the story is really about, what's truly happening from the hero. In other words, you've created a scenario in which your hero is essentially wandering around the book trying to figure out what's happening. This is another red flag. Now, this is not the same. Again, here's the nuance. Is your hero actively solving a mystery? That's active. That's not passive. But if your hero is stuck in a world that's just confusing and things are happening, like Alice in Wonderland, and they don't know why or what is the cause of it all, and there's just episode after episode in which our hero is just wondering what's going on, that is a red flag of a passive hero issue. Okay. So there's a difference. Your hero may be actively trying to solve a mystery, that's active. But if your hero is passively confused in a world of storytelling in which the true facts have been withheld from the hero, by who? By you. You're the writer. If it happened, it's because you did it, right? If that's so, you're in charge. You've got to take responsibility for that. That is another red flag. Now, here's a big red flag, and this can happen, and it certainly has happened. You find that you've written quite a bit, and there is no real story. It's just not coalescing into anything that you recognize as a story. It starts to feel like anecdotes, just disjointed anecdotes. It's not really accruing into any kind of plot line. That's often the a passive hero problem, plus the other huge red flag, right? Which is this: your hero has no mission. Now, anybody who's studied with me or watches this channel knows what I mean by mission. Let me just clarify it for those of you who are new. So a story is a journey of transformation for the hero. The hero has to go do something in order to earn this journey of change. We don't just change by sitting around. And the thing that the hero is going to do that's going to occupy them for most of the book, I like to call their mission. It's something that they have to do that's important. So it's not just a to-do list, it's a mission, right? So we feel that quality of it being significant in the word mission. And they don't need 20 missions. They basically need one mission. Dorothy wants to get home to Kansas. Meg Murray in A Wrinkle in Time wants to rescue her father. You can pretty much say it in a sentence what the hero's mission is, if in fact you've given your hero a mission. That's the big if. If you've given your hero a mission, you should be able to say it in a sentence. And if you've not given your hero a mission, what are they doing? You haven't necessarily given them something to do. And if you don't give somebody something to do, they're passive. They don't have anything to do. Now, most of us are self-aware enough to realize that if we sit down, we've got to just invent stuff and fill pages with words and feel like we're making progress. And so the pages and the words are piling up. They're accruing in quantity, but we're having a sinking feeling in our heart of hearts where we know the truth of things, that what we're writing is not adding up to a story. And so part of our writing practice becomes, well, if I just keep writing, the story will emerge. I've heard writers say that to me, and it's not that it's not true. There is real truth in the fact that for some of us, a certain amount of improvisation, playing around on the page, experimenting with character, experimenting with voice, just noodling, what I like to call noodling, releases a lot of our creativity, and we make discoveries and we do stuff. And I would call this exploratory writing. But these are not the pages that you need for your book. This is just what you are doing in order to find the ideas that you need in order to write a book. So you have to make that distinction. I'm not against exploratory writing, but I just don't want you to mistake it for drafting. It's two different things. Just the way drafting a book is different than revising a book. Exploratory writing is different than drafting. You can do that all you want. You might find that the most exploratory writing, the most effective type of exploratory writing doesn't involve putting words down on paper at all. Take a shower, go on a walk, think about it, talk aloud, talk in the voices of your characters, loosen up a bit. This is, let the creative process flow. That's amazing. But you have to know what you're looking for, right? You're sort of panning for gold. And what is the gold? The gold is an understanding of what journey of transformation your hero is going to go on and what mission you're going to give them that is going to be the mechanism of that change. It is going to be the series of obstacles and the continual moving outside the comfort zone that's going to allow your hero to have a journey of transformation. It's not easy to change, and our heroes have to earn it. So if your hero has no mission, it's not the hero's fault. That's on you, my storytellers, and you have to really figure it out and give them one. And when do they learn their mission? Do they learn it at the end of the book? No, it's no good then. That's like handing somebody a map at the end of the journey, right? You have to give them a mission at the beginning. The mission is sort of bestowed upon the hero or discovered by the hero, usually in the first act, maybe toward the end of the first act, or at the beginning of the second act. So we're, depending on how your book is structured, you're pretty near the beginning. It might be 10 to 20% of the way into the book, or you might have the kind of story structure where you're opening as the hero is basically crossing into the second act world of adventure, and the mission is revealed as they arrive, just as you can imagine Dorothy arriving in Oz and then discovering and deciding what her mission is. She's the one who says, well, I'd like to go home. And then the mission is laid out in specificity. Okay, well, if what you want to do is go home to Kansas, here's how you're going to do it. And the how you're going to do it is the mission. And it's what occupies her for the rest of the story. So I hope that's all clear. So if there is no mission, your hero's going to be passive, and it's not the hero's fault. Okay. Now, and here's another red flag. If your hero, if there is sort of a mission floating around, right, let's just say, and your hero is part of a group of characters, a group of co-adventurers, we'll call them, who are all assigned, in a sense, the solving of this mission, which is an extremely common structure, sort of kind of a good structure. It's one that a lot of stories use. If your hero is part of a group of co-adventurers who are all on the same mission, and everyone else or many of the other co-adventurers somehow seem more qualified than your hero does to solve this problem, then you're going to have a hard time as the writer manipulating the events of the story to make it about your hero, because they are not the most important problem solver on this mission. They're not the most valuable member of the party. Now, if you think about it for a second, I mentioned the character of Meg Murray in A Wrinkle in Time. She is part of a group of co-adventurers who go on a shared mission to rescue Meg's dad. She's there with her brother. She's there with her friend Calvin, and she's got these sort of fantastic, supernatural creatures to go with them and guide them. But there's something about Meg that makes her essentially the only one who can solve this at the end. And it has to do with her emotional capacity and her relationship to her brother, Charles Wallace. And she's the only one who can do it, right? The Mrs. Who and Mrs. Whatsit, they can't do it. She's the one who's got to do it. It's handled quite bluntly in A Wizard of Oz because Dorothy's the only one who can send herself home. It's explicitly stated. You had the power yourself. You just needed to go through your journey of transformation before you could access it. It's a unique quality. So if your hero does not have somehow the unique ability to be the singular solver of this mission, or the one upon whose shoulders it's going to fall at the end, you may have written yourself into a passive hero problem. The other great example, who I like to talk about a lot, of course, is Bilbo Baggins, one of a group of co-adventurers on a mission, but it's established with crystal clarity from the very beginning of this adventure, before they even set out, that Bilbo has a unique job to do. He is being added to this group of co-adventurers for a very singular reason. He's going to be the burglar. The whole journey is going to be about going to this dragon and getting the gold back from this dragon. And who's going to do it? It's Bilbo. He's given the title, the burglar. It's a whole group of co-adventurers, and they have a lot of different personalities. And one could argue that any one of them would probably be better equipped in a way in battle against the dragon. But Bilbo has unique qualities. He's the only hobbit. He's got a particular kind of mind, a particular kind of wit and strategic thinking, and the gold back. So these are examples of how your hero can be part of a group and still have this singular capacity. Now, I am going to another great question from Anne. Let's bring this up, Anne. I love this. Thank you for posing good questions. Anne asks, do I think there's a connection between having a more character-driven or concept-driven story and having a hard time developing a clear mission versus a more plot-driven orientation to writing? I don't think so, Anne, but I think it's an intelligent question because I kind of resist making too much of a distinction between character-driven and concept-driven and plot-driven. I think those are interesting phrases, but I think if we untangle them, there's not as much distinction as people like to think. And so I'll just, let me put this down for a second. So if we have a character-driven story, I'm trying to think of an example of something that might feel like more weighted toward a character-driven story. But let's just compare two of my favorite books, for example, Jane Eyre and The Hobbit. You could say that Jane Eyre is character-driven. It takes Jane throughout her whole life. It's narrated by Jane. We are like living as Jane as readers throughout the whole book. And it's all about her feelings and her need to survive and her desire for family and love and, all of this stuff. To me, I guess that would be considered character driven, whereas a book like The Hobbit is like the mothership of modern epic fantasy. It is about a bunch of, characters in a fantasy landscape going to deal with a dragon and steal gold and all this stuff. As a reader, as a thoughtful reader who knows both of these books well, I don't see any difference between the balance of character and plot of these two. Jane has a mission. She needs love. She needs love from page 1 of that book. She's a poorly treated child with no family, and she spends the entire book seeking family and seeking love. And as she reaches adulthood, and there's a few episodes in that book, as she's a child, she goes to school, she makes a special friend, then she goes and gets her job as a governess, and she meets Mr. Rochester, and we are immediately struck, as is she, by this sense of like, this is where her destiny lies in terms of finding love. But then what happens to a character on a mission? There's nothing but obstacles in the way. And so the story just puts obstacles in the way of Jane finding love with Mr. Rochester, obstacle after obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, until guess what? She prevails. There's a journey of transformation. She changes, Mr. Rochester changes, the world changes, a lot of things change. And in the end, she finds love. It's a mission. That's absolutely a mission. It's just as much a mission as Bilbo needing to find the gold. Because ultimately, what is Bilbo actually trying to find? We talk about this in Path of the Storyteller. We call it the inside dragon and the outside dragon. There is always something happening on the outside of the book, or otherwise we'd just be stuck in the hero's, train of thought, stream of consciousness. The hero's got to be out in the world doing stuff. But the stuff that they're doing, the mission that they're on, is simply, in a sense, the symbolic resolving of whatever internal struggle there may be. And in Bilbo's case, we meet him as a character who has lost the path. As he explicitly does later in the book, he strays from the path and he gets tangled up with spiders and has all kinds of adventures. But he's lost the path before we even meet him. He's living a life that's not authentic, that doesn't express the totality of who he is. And when he is first approached by that most epic fantasy of all mentor figures, the wizard with the long beard and the staff who comes saying, I have an adventure for you. He doesn't say, I have an adventure for you because I know you need more gold. He says, Bilbo, I have an adventure for you because look what's happened to you. You didn't used to be this way. This isn't the truth of who you are. You need an adventure. He offers it to Bilbo with the full knowledge that this is what Bilbo needs psychologically. Bilbo doesn't need more gold. He's got plenty. He's got plenty. So, Anne, that's a kind of a long-winded exploration, but prompted by your very good question of the fact that I don't actually make that distinction. I think what holds writers back from from developing a clear mission, which is your original question, what holds writers back from developing a clear mission is primarily that they don't know they're supposed to. This is just one of those counterintuitive facts of story structure that unless somebody gives you a gentle shake and says, nope, one clear mission's great. You need that for your book. It's not something that most writers will intuitively get from just being readers. We tend to think that lots of stuff has to happen and that we have to keep twisting and turning and upping our game, and just this continual invention, because that's what we see as readers. We just see new complications happening, but we don't necessarily see the architecture, just the same way that we go to visit a friend's house and I absolutely love the wallpaper that you chose. The throw pillows are divine. The stuff you've got cooking in the kitchen smells heavenly. We don't stand in the house and say, I really like the beams. I really like the way the electrical and the plumbing is right. Why? We don't see them because the house is finished. It's been decorated. It's there for aesthetic consumption. A finished book is like a finished house. Everything's been finished, and the throw pillows have been fluffed, and it's ready for the aesthetic consumption of the reader. The reader's going to enjoy and appreciate all of those fun characters, the witty banter, the great descriptions, the settings, and all of this. The reader's going to appreciate all of that the way we appreciate the decor of our friend's house. But what holds the book up is the architecture. It's what they don't see. Just the same way what holds our friend's house up is the architecture, it's the engineering, it's the stuff we don't see. Now, if you're writing by ear, and I've done live streams about this, and you can go back and check them out on the channel. If you're writing by ear, by which I mean you are primarily self-taught, and you think that because I read a lot and I'm a very fluent reader, right, that I can imitate this. I'm very observant. When I go to a friend's house, I notice everything. I notice the wallpaper, the carpet, the throw pillows, the paint colors. I notice all of it. You notice what you can see, but you don't notice what you can't see, right? And so the same holds true if we're trying to teach ourselves how to write just by reading. It's the stuff that we don't actually get to see that's holding it all together. So again, Anne, it's a great question, which is why I'm being a little long-winded about my answer. What holds writers back from giving their characters a clear mission mostly is the fact that they have not been taught that they have to. And once they're taught that they have to, they sometimes find it counterintuitive because they haven't seen that, but then we start to talk about it and they're like, oh, you're right. There's one mission. There's just one mission. In book after book, in story after story, and movie after movie, there's basically one mission. And there you have it, Now, we did a recent live stream also about plots and subplots. And so if you're interested in but what about the subplots, go watch that live stream, because you'll see that there I also emphasize that there's got to be one main mission. And the subplots have to be subordinate in the hierarchy in order for the thing to hold together properly. So you see, all of story structure and writing craft, it all ends up working as a complex system. Here we try to break it apart a little bit so we can focus on the individual components. So thanks to Anne's question, this is kind of a natural segue into really what I want you to think about in order to fix this. If you think it might be a problem in your own work, or if you've recognized that, oh yeah, I get that feedback a lot, that my hero's passive, that other characters are making all the decisions. That's a big red flag. That anytime your hero needs to know something, they're just asking questions, and everybody else in the book seems to know what's going on, and your hero's just the questioning hero. Like every line out of your hero's mouth is a question. That's another red flag. What are we going to do about it? My first prescription to you of course, is to really get a hold of story structure, to really start to explore the ways in which your story is designed by you as a separate entity to the hero, that you are the puppet master and the hero is your beloved victim, we'll call them, right? Because your hero is the one who's got to go through the hard stuff. That's what you are creating here. You're not creating a little fictional friend for you to send on a happy adventure. That's not a story. You're creating this entity, right? This true hero to go on a difficult journey of transformation by means of undertaking a mission that you're going to design. It's all up to you. So you have to get hold of a sense of story structure and really understand all of the things that you can't necessarily consciously see as a reader. Now, after you have a hold of it, and my students know this to be true, I always apologize because it's as if you've become a professional chef. And now you go out to eat in restaurants and you see everything differently because guess what? Now you can see. Now you can see what's unseen, right? You're onto all the pro tricks, and you will have a different experience as a reader because you'll start to see this stuff a little bit more. But you have to get to that point where all of the invisible stuff becomes visible to you. And guess what? A master writer, like a truly, truly skilled piece of writing, you will fall into it with complete pleasure. Like it becomes the writing is so well crafted that you can just enjoy it as a reader again and again too. I still love to read The Hobbit and I still love to read Jane Eyre. I don't sit there going, oh, look, she's on her mission. If I'm preparing a talk, yes, but as a reader, I still love them just the way I always did. So you've got to get hold of story structure. You've got to give your hero a mission. You've got to make them you sort of uniquely qualified to solve this problem that you've set up. And you have to not just give them a mission that's going to matter at the end of the book, but you have to put them in pursuit of that mission, scene after scene after scene after scene, all throughout the book. And what does that mean? It means that each scene is like a little snow globe of the story, a little step along the way, another move along the game board. It's not the end game, it's just the step. And everyone knows, especially in spring, I love a good baseball metaphor. So if you think of it, it's like the game is broken up into innings, right? And each team gets a turn, and each inning for each team has at bats. You just start to see how the outcome of the entire game to win is the mission for both teams, right? And the outcome is not decided in a stroke. It's decided in these incremental little battles, these little struggles. Each at bat, each inning, right, adds up to the outcome of the whole. And so we have to start thinking in terms of a more incremental approach so that our hero is not passive, and then wins the game with a 4-run homer. Our hero is at bat again and again, in the field again and again. Each time they have a goal. So there's an interesting relationship between the mission of the overall story and giving your hero an active goal each step along the way. We should be thinking of our hero as being the one to make the choices, to dare the dangerous things, to lead, to decide, to dare, make a list, a useful list of the active verbs, right, that are pertinent to your story. And make sure that in each scene that you write for your hero, that there's an active verb attached to whatever it is that they're doing in that scene. So an active verb like, this hero is going to trick someone or seduce someone or convince someone or, or physically overpower someone, like active stuff, not your hero's gonna sleep their way through the scene, be confused through the scene, right? It's not passive states, but active verbs. Just start to think about this as an example. The last thing I want to say about this, you all know, and some of you have similar experience to me as well, I know who are here, that I started my career as an artist professionally as an actor on stage. And so I had some actor training. And the old cliche of being an actor in acting classes, they say, well, what's your motivation? Right? Why are you doing what you're doing in this scene? The actor is given a text, and the text says, the actor says to the other character, I hate you, and then stands there, and then a minute later kisses them. It's like, well, what's your motivation? Like, the text is unclear, right? You have to decide, like, oh, when I say I hate you, what I really mean is I love you, and my motivation in this scene is actually to express my true feelings to you in the hope that you're going to return feelings. Like, you have to kind of invent, what's the motivation for everything I do? Without a reason, it's just, there's no acting, right? And they call it acting for a reason. It's not sitting. It's not couch potatoing. We don't give a Tony Award for the best couch potato in a leading role. We give it for the best actor in a leading role. And it's like a fun mnemonic device. Just remember that your hero is an actor. Your hero is acting their way through the story by taking action. They're actively motivated, scene after scene, to accomplish something. Every time we see your hero, they should be wanting something, striving for something, doing something, right? If we were in a ball game, your hero gets up to bat and they have an objective. They're not there randomly. They're not wondering why they're at at the home plate. They don't know. It's not like they're like, oh, someone just handed me a bat. Is it my turn? They're there to hit the ball. They're there to hit the ball. So I just want you to think of that. Give your hero just a ball to hit. It's going to be a different ball in each scene, but give them a ball to hit and make sure they take a really good swing at it. They may not hit it, right? Not every scene is a triumph for your hero. In fact, most of them probably won't be. Your hero's fortunes will fluctuate a lot throughout the story. But just make sure that you give them a ball to hit and they take their best swing at it. Okay? Even if they're part of a team, at this moment, what they're doing is what matters. All right. I love driving the bus as a metaphor, but boy, in spring, baseball is a really good metaphor for storytelling as well. I'm just going to take a moment to cast my eyes over the comments. Sometimes there's a tiny lag in the comments popping up in front of me. So if you have a question or a comment, this would be a really good time to type it in. That would be great. I'm just going to let that sit for a minute so I can wait for you all. And just a last reminder, if you're here watching on YouTube, welcome to the channel. I'm so glad to meet you. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, would you please subscribe? It's so helpful to the channel. It helps YouTube put it in front of more people. If you liked the content and found it of benefit, you can give a thumbs up on YouTube as well. And that serves the same noble purpose. And if you're not on my Path of the Storyteller mailing list, let's just make another request for you to get on it. It's Path of the Storyteller is where I teach the Path of the Storyteller program twice a year. It's going to be coming up again in the fall. I know that I've already got people on the waiting list, and I'm super excited about that. And there's going to be some other offerings. There have recently been offerings to do some one-on-one coaching with me, which has been amazing. It's been such a treat to work one-on-one with so many of you to get a taste of what you're working on. And that offer, is still accessible through the website. And get on the mailing list, www.pathofstoryteller.com. You'll be the first to hear about that. And also about an upcoming course offering that I'm very excited about. And that touches upon this topic that we kind of ended today's discussion with, which is how to think of the individual scenes of your story as the building blocks of an entire narrative. It's a really nice kind of deep dive into that very, very practical question. All right, my friends, I think that is it in terms of questions. I thank you so much for being here. Great comment from Anne. We'll use this to close up. I like this, Anne. The architecture metaphor for story structure, active verbs. Try the verb list. Yes, sounds fun and useful. I would love to hear how it works for you. So come back and leave a comment below the video after you've had a chance to try it. I love to keep the conversation going. And as ever, if there's something that you would like me to focus on in one of these live streams, just leave a comment below the video. Some of the best ideas that I've gotten for live streams have come from all of you, and I so appreciate your suggestions. All right, my friends, as of today, we have a holiday weekend coming up in the US of A. It's coming up a Memorial Day weekend. So I wish you all a peaceful weekend. I hope you get some rest, have time for your loved ones, have time for your personal self-care, and I hope have a little bit of time for your writing as well. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next time.